Neither and in between. Welcome to our next panel, the biggest console flops in gaming history. I'm Melissa, or mcroft07, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'll be the host today. I hope you're all ready to get schooled. We've got a lot of slides to get through, so we're going to be speed running through this one. You might see me say wrap it up later on. I'd like our lovely panelists to introduce themselves in their own way, as none of them know them any better than themselves.
Hello. Thank you for the applause.
Exactly. Exactly.
As you might notice on this slide, there's supposed to be 3 of us. I'm Asper.
I'm Janox.
There you go. We have a podcast called Gamecast. It's a Belgian podcast about games. And there's 3 of us doing that, but one of them couldn't make it. So we had him replaced by somebody better looking, and then he couldn't make it.
We heard that an hour ago.
Yeah. So,
so this is going to be rough.
Yeah, if you notice us looking at our phones to read the text that we've written ourselves and think, what a shit show, that's why.
I didn't learn his lines, so we just split them. So we're going to look at our phones a lot.
We're going to improvise.
Sorry for that.
We're going to improvise our way through it. It's going to be fun. I hope you learned something. We're going to tell you some stories that you may or may not have heard before about gaming. Starting with...
You can correct us after the show.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of actually in here.
Yeah,
so,
when the cameras stop rolling.
Actually.
All right. Let's start in 1981. In 1981, Nintendo had an idea for a game where you had to save your girlfriend, climb up some construction site, save your girlfriend who was kidnapped by a brute. Can anybody guess the name of that game?
All wrong.
It's time
All
for my
wrong.
very first. Actually, this was meant to be a Popeye game. Unless somebody said Popeye and guessed, in which case you were right. This was meant to be Popeye. But there was some technical limitations and they couldn't get the sprites on the screen. So they invented their own characters. So, oh yeah, Popeye, yeah, reveal. Good slide. This is Olive. That they turned her into Lady, which later became Pauline. Bluto, or Brutus, depending where you're from, became Donkey Kong. The resemblance is uncanny. And then Popeye, of course, became, and somebody already yelled it there, Jumpman. Who then became Mario, of course. The most successful gaming franchise in the world.
Exactly. But we are here to talk about the biggest flops. And Mario wasn't really a flop, was he? Well, that game had to be made to save Nintendo from a flop. The year before, Nintendo made Radar Scope. The game was successful in Japan, so they thought it would be successful in America. Wrong. Of the 3,000 arcades that they made, the cabinets, they only sold 1,000. So something had to be done.
1,000 in the whole of America?
Yes, in the whole of America. So something had to be done with the 2,000 arcade cabinets collecting dust in the warehouses. Then 2 unknown Japanese developers decided to write a new game that could reuse the hardware of Radar Scope. They stuck some new stickers on those cabinets and voila, Donkey Kong was born.
Yeah, you see Radar Scope on the left and then they just put new stickers on it on the right, so they didn't lose 2,000 cabinets, really.
Exactly. The 2,000 units flew off the shelves and another 130,000 followed.
Yeah, so, where are we?
Raise your hand.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, raise your hand if you know who these people are, the unknown Japanese developers. Gunpei Yokoi on the right, exactly the inventor of the Game & Watch and the Game Boy. And on the left, we got Shigeru Miyamoto, who invented, of course, Mario, Zelda, and Star Fox. But that was an example of a flop that turned into a success. Not everyone had that luck.
Exactly. So Radar Scope was an example of a flop that Nintendo managed to turn into that success. But Nintendo is not the only company to have had failures in the gaming history. There are many other flops worth mentioning.
I'll do the next bit, right?
Yeah, sure, yes. So
yeah, there you go. Let's start with the most famous one. Get that one out of the way.
We had to.
Of course we had to. So yeah, the biggest flop, probably known by everyone, E.T. Huge summer blockbuster movie, which one was it, 82? So and at the time of that movie, the most well-known console was the Atari 2600. This beautiful piece of hardware. They don't do enough wooden finishing in modern consoles anymore. Anyway, they saw the popularity of the movie and said, we want a game on our console from E.T. and we want it under the Christmas tree by Christmas, which is logical. Any other time of year would be weird. And so that gave the programmer 5 weeks. 5 weeks to finish an E.T. game. Yeah.
An absurdly short amount of time.
Yeah, but he did it somehow. So this is.
They had to release at all costs.
Yeah, that looks silly, yeah. There's supposed to be gameplay, I think. Is that a movie? No, whatever. Oh,
there it is.
Hey. Okay, so you had to just look for phone parts, I think, and can phone home at the end. But it was terrible. It was so terrible. Although, wait, there's a cool little fact before I move on. This game, do you want to guess how much it sold?
No.
How many copies they sold?
Yeah, sorry.
20. 20 is a good guess. It's 2.5 million. Very close, very close. Yeah, this flop that we know sold 2.5 million copies. Problem is they made 4 million. So they had a bit of a excess amount of copies of this game. And yeah, not only that, but this game was so bad that by the time everyone bought it, everyone brought it back to the store and asked for their money back.
It's a bit of the cyberpunk of its time.
Sorry, is he teleporting by extending his neck? Like, he just teleports when he...
Have you not seen the movie?
No,
That's
sorry.
surely what it does.
5 weeks. No, it was really that bad.
Yeah, so about from the 2.5 million copies that they sold, 2 million was brought back to the store.
So they only sold 500,000.
500,000 in the end. Atari got almost everything back. 3.5 million cartridges that nobody wanted. And at this point, as the example we showed from Nintendo, Nintendo would have just repurposed the hardware, make a new game and use it. But Atari couldn't do that. So they, so what did Atari do?
Dug a very deep hole.
Yeah.
What did they do? Exactly.
Just a giant landfill where they dumped all of their excess cartridges and hardware.
And other consoles, yeah.
Yeah,
It was a flop so big that it sent a shockwave through the entire gaming industry. And caused a huge market crash that lasted until 1985.
You can see how close it gets to just disappearing, right? They nearly crashed the whole market and made it disappear.
It's actually something that Atari always...
Go on. Oh yeah, they never acknowledged the landfill.
Sorry,
that was what they
we're improvising.
Yeah.
They never acknowledged it until a few years ago. Well, quite a few years ago now. That a documentary maker, he actually invested a lot of money trying to find the landfill because Atari always said, "No, we didn't do that," and they found a huge chunk.
Just standing next to a big hole. So what's this?
Exactly.
It's not ours.
You can actually buy those cartridges from the hole on eBay. They're super cheap because
they're still not worth anything.
They're still not worth anything because the game is that bad.
It's an incredible piece of gaming history. $20? Nah.
Yeah, I think it's like $14 for a boxed copy. So it's that bad. But despite that, Atari continued to make games and consoles. But did things turn out well for Atari? Well, not really. The next few consoles they made could never match the popularity of its first one, the Atari 2600 or the Atari Junior you see there. So they pivoted and they switched to the computer market with moderate success. Our personal favorite, though, from this era is the Atari SEX.
Just because of the name.
Yeah, it's just funny because it's 6. But in 1993, they wanted to make a comeback and they released a new console. The new console not only had to compete with Sega and Nintendo, but it should compete with the upcoming PlayStation, which didn't exist. More on that later.
Yep.
More on that later. But how were they going to do that? Because they flopped quite a lot. They were going to be the first console with 64-bit processors. That generation of consoles all had 16-bit processors. So everyone thought the next logical step would be 32-bit. And Jaguar said, well, not Jaguar. Atari said, no, we're going to go all the way and we're going to do 64-bit, which was pretty remarkable and a huge leap forward. However, they didn't have the big budgets compared to their competitors, so they had to improvise and they had to be smart with their money. For example, to save on research and development, they reused motherboards of telephones for the controllers. So they looked like you'd order pizza in the middle of a battle. This is all true, by the way. Nothing is... you can look this up.
You can actually order pizza.
To freshen up the look a bit, each game came with a piece of cardboard that you could click over the buttons, which showed which buttons were mapped to in-game actions or weapons or whatever. So that's cool. But unfortunately, the software for making the games, the development kits for the console were that bad, and many third-party gaming companies immediately backed out. In the end, only 50 games were released during the Jaguar's lifespan, which isn't a lot, and including ports of Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, which were actually quite good. However, they did make exclusives, like the first-person shooter Alien vs. Predator exclusive for the platform. And also the first Rayman that I think everyone here played was actually made for the Atari Jaguar, but they also saw that it didn't work. But this did not help. Nobody bought the bloody thing. Meanwhile, the PlayStation 1 came out, and they had like these very hip and trendy CDs compared to the outdated cartridge system the Atari Jaguar had. And Atari saw this and they panicked. So what did they do? They quickly released a CD add-on, so you could actually play CDs on the Jaguar. So you had to click it into your device. They also dropped the console to $100 under their competitors. So they thought everyone is going to buy this. Wrong. But it was all a little too late. And with less than 150,000 units sold, it was taken off the market in 1996. 150,000 is not a lot. I don't know.
More people had ET.
Yeah, exactly. That's how bad it was. Yet that was not the last that we saw of the Atari Jaguar. Fun fact now. To win some of the money back, Atari sold the rights to the molds, so for the shape of the console and the cartridges. The company that bought it specialized in cameras for dentists.
Check this. Whoa.
Hey. So, if you have a dental checkup soon, you actually might still come across an Atari Jaguar. Even the cartridge slot is still there, and the cartridges themselves were actually reused to add extra memory modules for the cameras. So, yeah, that's how they got a little bit of money back. Still went bankrupt, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's the Atari Jaguar. Actually, a cool console, but
too bad. That's pretty weird. But the weirdest console is probably from Casio.
Who knows they had a console?
Exactly.
Oh.
What?
What's it called?
I cannot remember, but I know they had a console.
All right, good enough, good enough.
Very good, very good. So yeah, when we think of Casio, we don't think of consoles.
Think of cool watches with like calculators.
Are you wearing the one? No.
Yeah, the calculator one.
Oh, there.
Fucking cool.
Yeah, we think of calculators. Calculators with wonderful games like typing boobies. And lol plus lol equals hee hee. Yeah. So when they announced we're gonna in '95 was it? We're gonna release a console. Everybody said, "Well, what is 7734?"
Yay!
I'm proud of that one. Shut up. So that was not the weirdest announcement yet. You know, it was a console targeted only at girls.
Oh, Loopy.
The Casio Loopy.
You said it?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Casio Loopy, targeted only at girls, and it had, as you can see, one controller port. Because apparently, Casio thought, well, if a girl's gaming, she won't have any friends. Blame Casio, eh? Don't look at me.
It's not us.
The best thing about this, by far, which probably is going to be the reason that everybody here wants one, it had a printer.
A built-in printer.
A built-in printer. You could Just send your victory royale, print it out in 5 minutes, send it to the mail. You could just have an album with all your victory royales printed out. It's beautiful. I forgot what I wrote here.
A bit like a share.
It's also, I'm proud of that one. It makes also, it's the world's only console that won't turn on when you ran out of yellow ink. Proud of that one too. So yeah, it's like a share button, but undoubtedly 1,000 times cooler. The sticker feature also had an extension later on. I'm gonna have to read this from the slide. It's the Video Seal Word Processor XK700.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. If that's too hard to pronounce, they called it the Magical Shop. The Magical Shop was like an extension you could plug into your Casio Loopy, and it had a video input, which is bonkers in '95 because you could give it your own video feed, add filters, stickers, print them out again. It's just Snapchat from the '90s. Yeah, exactly.
Can I just get a little noise from the crowd? If you could print out your Elden Ring victory with a sticker from your own console, would you use that? I think I'd use that.
With a little, like, butterfly on it. You died.
Enemy fell.
Add some stickers. Yeah, if you think this box is amazing, get ready for the box. This is the extension. This is the box from the Casio Loopy. Peak 90s. Not only does the console only take in like 10% of the box, they've put on lovely, unique selling points, which everybody, I'm sure,
get ready for this.
Can read. Don't worry, I got Google Translate. So what does that say? It says, games are fun, stickers are fun, sticker communication that spreads the fun.
We don't know either.
Yeah, I'm guessing they still had the thing going like fun plus fun equals hee.
They were stuck.
On the right, we have turn your feelings into stickers. Let's have a conversation about stickers. Having a rough puberty, print a sticker. It's what the Japanese are good at, talking about feelings. Anywho, sorry. It can easily create original stickers, vivid and beautiful colors, and equipped with a 32-bit RISC CPU. It just had to be on the box. It just had to be there.
Killer feature.
Yeah,
it's the killer feature.
The killer feature.
32-bit RISC CPU.
Yeah. Well, despite the killer feature, when the Casio Loopy released in '95, the PlayStation was already out. That looked like, you know, the thing on the right, Casio Loopy on the left. Yeah, as you can guess, it wasn't that popular. And you know what? The PlayStation also had a 32-bit RISC CPU and didn't put it on their box. The console got about 11 games. It lasted 3 years on the market, and they never made the return to the gaming industry. But on the plus side, their calculators are now this advanced. You can play Doom on them. Wait. Sorry, there you go, Doom.
All right, okay, but name me any device that can't run Doom.
Tiger Electronics.
Exactly.
That was a segue. Let's talk about the handheld market for a minute. As you can see, the handheld market has been dominated by Nintendo. We all had a Game Boy probably, or a DS, or a Switch now. There were plenty companies who tried to get in on the portable market, but the handheld, it never really worked out. You had, what was it? Sega had the Game Gear, Atari had the Lynx, which, by the way, has an incredible Tobey Maguire ad, but then whatever this thing is. Who had this as a kid? There you go. Whose grandmother still plays on that thing? So yeah, but Tiger Electronics was the only company who tried for a bit longer, who tried to hold on. Their strategy was, let's try and copy Nintendo, but 10 years later. Good plan. So when Game & Watch came out, what, 1980? With their the LED games, Tiger Electronics did the same thing in 1990. And still selling them, by the way.
They actually still release these, by the way.
Yes.
Not a joke.
Their horrible, but they have popular franchises. They had X-Men, they have, you know, Mega Man 2, Sonic, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Spider-Man. They had famous properties. They were dirt cheap, so it sold quite well. It did quite well, but they even did this Dragon Ball Z type scouter version of it, the R Zone. Does anyone have that? I want to buy one. I want one. It looks cool. It's probably absolutely, yeah, the quality is probably under 9,000. Anyway,
He insisted on the joke. I'm sorry.
I'm proud of this. So yeah, the hype went, the lack of quality of these things made the hype die down quite quickly. So they needed something new. So they thought, okay, it's time to make a competitor for the Game Boy.
Bring out the big guns.
The big guns. And they made the Tiger Gamecom. And they had a
Actually,
lovely ad for it that we're going to play for you. And
It's
try
bad.
Oh,
not to feel insulted.
Tough guy. Little help here.
This is an actual ad, by the way.
I have a surprise for all the slackers, but nothing better to do than play games and surf the net all day. Game Call! Lay those bloodshot eyes on these babies! It speaks!
Let's rock.
Begs to be touched! Wires you to the internet! And it plays more games than you idiots have brain cells! Any questions? Does it play? Idiot! Next question! How about compatibility? How much does it cost? Let's get 'em!
Gamecom, the ultimate portable gaming system.
Do you think this was a success?
How do we sell a system? Like insult everyone who wants to buy it. Yeah. You're all idiots for wanting this. Yeah. That would have been great. So yeah, this thing, the Gamecom, had a touchscreen, a calendar, a phone book, and the ability to connect to the internet.
With an actual cable, by the way, because Wi-Fi was not a thing.
Yeah.
So you had to plug in a cable.
From a handheld. Smart. The thing had more in common with a cell phone, except you couldn't make any phone calls with it. It sounds very fancy, but what about games? Well, it had Resident Evil 2, which looked like this. Do you remember Resident Evil 2?
Ooh.
It wasn't this, was it? So we had Resident Evil 2, Sonic Jam, Duke Nukem 3D, Mortal Kombat Trilogy. It all sounds good until you see it. They didn't have a color screen, and this was released in '97. In '97. So yeah, all the games seemed to run at half speed. The system was very cheap. It was only $70. But if you see this gameplay, it's no wonder that it was an absolute flop. Nobody wanted this thing. And a year later, the Game Boy Color came out. So why would you buy the Gamecom? Tiger Electronics was bought by Hasbro after this. And the Gamecom disappeared with less than 300,000 units sold.
Still double of the Atari Jaguar.
Still double on the Atari
But
Jaguar.
okay, who here plays handheld games? Right. And to all those who didn't raise their hand, don't you guys have phones? Hey, I got you there. I also insisted on this one. Right, all right.
Memes.
Memes. In 2002, the Game Boy Advance was selling like hotcakes. But only the real mobile gamers, they spent hours playing Snake on their phone. Woo! Nokia. That was the hot stuff. All right. Nokia wanted to delve further into the gaming industry, and they came up with the Nokia N-Gage. Oh yeah, see, that's the sound I wanted to hear. Exactly. A combination of a high-tech phone and video games. Combination every tech geek wanted and lusted for, including myself. They just forgot a few things, like you had to use it as a phone. And also games weren't exactly made for vertical screens. So
If you see Rayman on the right, where do you jump to?
they just cut it off. It was that bad. Okay. But now the big thing is, the worst thing actually is from the N-Gage is, well, the second worst thing. If you wanted to insert a new game, you had to remove the battery cover, remove the battery, take out the SIM-like card or SD card-like game, put it back in, put the battery back in, put the cover back on, power it on. And first, for the older people or like the older audience, you had to
remember, you had to, every time you took out the battery, you had to redo the date, the date,
you
and
had
the
to
hour,
set
and
the
all
date,
that shit.
the dates
Every
and
time
the,
you wanted to play another game.
and the time. Exactly. So they didn't really think about it, apparently. So that didn't go well. So, and who knows how you had to hold the Nokia N-Gage to take a call. Was it A, B, or C?
All right, hands up for A. Hands up for B. Okay, quite a few. Hands up for C. All right.
All right. Hey, I like that. Actually, it is C.
Well done.
Why? They didn't think about it, so they put the speaker on the side for some reason. For the people in Belgium, we reused the model from Fun Stores, since they're... no? Nobody? Okay.
I don't think they know the Fun Store here.
God damn. Right. No, so the first meme was actually born. It's called the Taco Phone. The Taco Phone meme, there was a website called SciTalkin, where people could submit photos of themselves mimicking the Taco Phone meme. This website actually still exists because this was actually one of the first internet memes that people actively contributed to. And it's a huge archive that's out there.
The original meme.
Yeah, this is actually one of the original memes, no joke.
The site is still online, but you can't send any pictures in anymore,
Yeah.
which is a shame.
What was cool though, you could play Tomb Raider or Tony Hawk Pro Skater on your phone. We have to give them credit for that because that's super awesome. But after its release in October 2003, they didn't see the commercial success that they hoped for. Well, I've told you a few reasons why. But they realized they made some serious design mistakes, but they still believed in their concept of the Nokia N-Gage. So what did they do? Merely 7 months later, in May 2004, the Nokia N-Gage was shown with a new, smaller design, and you could swap your game without having to remove your battery. You could like insert it at the bottom now, so big win. But they wanted to keep the cost low because it was a quite expensive device. So they left out other few key features, such as playing MP3s, which were very popular at the time. Also the USB port and the radio receiver had to go. That didn't go well for them. With this new QD version, they wanted to conquer the handheld market once more. And they really believed in it, but the damage was already done. It became a huge financial headache for Nokia. It's in a museum of failure. But they just scraped every bit of hope they still had left in mobile gaming together, and they tried again. This time as a new platform, Nokia N-Gage Service. Other Nokia phones could adapt the service to provide games on their devices. The equivalent of an app store for games as we know it now, actually quite ahead of its time, before the app store that we all know right now. But again, with only, I think, 5 or 6 titles actually released, it was the final blow. The N-Gage name had to endure. R.I.P. the N-Gage, the device every gaming teenager wanted.
I wanted it so bad, but
oh yeah,
damn.
I loved it. This bit is also something that I have to read a bit. I'm so sorry. From a cell phone that couldn't make calls properly to a headset that couldn't be worn properly. What are we talking about?
Woo.
Some people are what? Okay, I like it. This is the Nintendo Virtual Boy, a virtual reality console released in 1995. Exactly. So not the Oculus Rift or whatever. They did it first. Well, not first, but they released it commercially first. Think of it as an Apple Vision Pro of the 90s. Overpriced, overhyped, and a huge flop for Nintendo. So much so that they gave up on the console after only 1 year. This is not done a lot, so this was really bad for Nintendo. It wasn't not even released in Europe. So there are some really rare posters in Dutch for here in the Netherlands and in Belgium that are found, but they all got pulled from the shelves.
Yeah, So they were planning on releasing.
Yeah, they were
had
planning on.
marketing done, but
If you go to the museum in Bonami Spelmuseum here in the Netherlands, they have a kiosk.
kiosk.
Yeah, okay. That they plan to put in stores to show the console to consumers translated in Dutch. So they really planned to release it here in Europe. But where did it go wrong? The Virtual Boy was, after all, the brainchild of Gunpei Yokoi, who also had known huge success with the Game Boy, of course.
But the reason the Game Boy was successful because they could sell it at a low price. How did we type it? It had really efficient.
They made optimal use of known and cheap technology,
That's it.
keeping
here had
costs
a
and
Game
battery
Boy?
consumption low.
We are like Game Boys. We are like Game Boys.
So why did you have a Game Boy and not
The Virtual Boy.
not Virtual? No, not a Game Gear or a Lynx? Cost exactly. They had color screens. The Game Boy did not. So they would view the Game Boy as inferior, but yet everyone bought a Game Boy because it was just cheaper.
And battery life was way better.
And battery life was way better. So they tried to do the same thing with the Virtual Boy. But they added a color screen. One color. It only had one color. It had red.
It had a
red
color
was the color.
screen.
There was... This was the Virtual Boy.
And actually, it didn't even have a screen. There were 224 mini red LEDs that were shot at your eyeballs into your retinas at very high speed, straight to through two mirrors, which created the illusion of a screen by using only one color and admittedly the cheapest LED.
That's the way I want my games to be shot in my eyes with lasers.
Because red LEDs were used for like telephones, so they were super cheap to use and not the other colors. But by using only one color, they could, just like the Game Boy, keep the costs down a bit. Despite this, the Virtual Boy still costed $180, which was really high for the time. For comparison, the Game Boy only costed half that when it got launched 6 years earlier.
The Game Boy got what, 30 hours of gameplay on 4 batteries. Virtual Boy has
4 hours with 6 batteries. So that was not ideal. Lastly, the console was very user-unfriendly. Unlike current VR headsets, you couldn't wear the Virtual Head Boy. You actually had to like dive into it. I don't know. They never actually told you how to do it.
Oh, they did tell you. They tell you
But
to
he's
lie
actually-
down and have it sit on your face.
But go one back, because he's actually doing it wrong. You're actually supposed to put your arms around the stand.
You're supposed to hug it.
I actually had to. That's why. It's actually a fun device.
Good controller.
Yeah, the controller is actually really fun. But they told you to lie down and let it sit on your face because it was a handheld. On top of that, players complained about headaches, nausea, because it's really that bad, and just a general feeling of disappointment. With only 22 games and 770,000 consoles, which is a lot more than the Atari Jaguar, this was Nintendo's biggest blunder.
You really hung up on that Jaguar.
Yeah, I'm really. But is the Virtual Boy the biggest fail of Nintendo?
No.
Exactly.
That trophy goes to the Nintendo PlayStation.
Who's heard about it?
We're talking about the Nintendo PlayStation, right?
Nice.
Not the PlayStation. Because Sony and Nintendo were once best friends for life in the early 90s. Oh yeah. Forgot I had this slide.
Animations.
Look at that, yeah. The Nintendo PlayStation. So yeah, there was this engineer at Sony called Ken Kutaragi. And he saw his daughter play on a Famicom, the NES as we know it. And he said, I want to get into the gaming business. This looks great. So he asked his bosses at Sony, like, can we do something with gaming? They were like looking at their music palace and movies and television, like, nah, bro, you're good. So he did it in secret. He actually, just black and white picture of a kid playing Famicom. He did it in secret. He made a sound chip for the upcoming Super Nintendo. So the Super Famicom, Super Nintendo was being made, and Ken Kutaragi applied himself to make a sound chip for it in secret. The bosses at Sony didn't know this. But when it was finished, he showed it. The bosses heard it, and they were like, damn, that's good. And they allowed it to happen. They worked together, and if people... Who has a Super Nintendo at home? if you open it and you look inside, there's a Sony chip there. The sound chip, which is bonkers because that means that we have the iconic Super Nintendo sound. We have Sony to thank for that. And this, I mean, thank you, Sony.
Thanks, Ken Kutaragi.
Thanks, Ken Kutaragi. So yeah, Sony and Nintendo were working together, and Ken Kutaragi wanted more. He wanted more. He knew the power of CDs, because Super Nintendo obviously still had cartridges, and CDs. I don't want to skip to the next slide. This is the CD-ROMs had 100 times more storage, slower loading times, but still more storage. So he asked Nintendo, like, can we do something with the CD-ROMs? And Nintendo was hesitant, but like, okay, make something. And they made the Super Disc. That's like an add-on to pop underneath your Super Nintendo. It could read disc, and they would also make like the combination that we showed before, the Nintendo PlayStation that could do both. So that was all fine and dandy, but where did it go wrong? Yeah, well, money and power, of course. Sony had all the rights to the Super Disc format, so not Nintendo, but Sony were the ones who could choose what would be released on that Super Nintendo, that Super Disc, which is bonkers for Nintendo. They were like, no, this is our console, what do you mean? And meanwhile, Sony started a game studio to make their own games. They're like, oh, Nintendo was getting a bit scared, really. Yamauchi, the president of Nintendo at the time, said like, oh, they're just using us to get into the gaming industry, and we're not going to allow that. He was pretty pissed off. So he
wanted to prevent it.
He wanted to get revenge. He wanted to get revenge. He wanted to basically humiliate Sony. So where do you go when you want to humiliate Sony? The Netherlands. Welcome to the humiliation of Sony, everyone. They went to Philips from the Netherlands, who was a competitor of Sony, and gave them the we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Chill, man, chill.
One thing at a time. We'll get to the CDI. So yeah, they gave Philips the rights to build the Super Disc, and in that contract, Nintendo would keep the rights to basically everything. They forgot. They didn't tell Sony about this. They were like, we're outie. Bye, Irish goodbye, just left. And so when there was in 1991, there was a Consumer Electronics show, which is basically like E3, before E3 was...
CES still exists, right?
Yeah, it still exists. Beautiful technology and electronics, I guess. So Sony was there, and they took the stage, proudly announcing, like, we're working together with Nintendo. And they unveiled a prototype of the Nintendo PlayStation on stage. They were super happy, everybody very happy. And then Nintendo came the day after saying, nope, we're not doing that. We're working with Philips. So yeah, the Sony Nintendo thing, yeah, they were pretty pissed, obviously, for good reason. They tried to make it work. Believe it or not, they tried to make it work. Nintendo and Sony had a new contract signed that Sony would basically have the same thing like Philips. They'd make the Super Disc, but they relinquished the rights to the Super Disc format. But Ken Kutaragi was, rightfully so, quite angry, because he was the one that started all of it at Sony. And he convinced his bosses to just tear up the contract and do it themselves. So that's why we have PlayStation.
Who here had PlayStation? Can we get a cheer as well? Yes, nice.
Happy.
All right, awesome. I don't want to be the bringer of like not fun, but you got 5 minutes left. Wrap it
Right,
up, guys.
let's wrap it up. Okay, what about Philips? The partnership was cancelled, but as a compensation, because they felt kind of bad for them, Nintendo allowed them to use Mario and Zelda licenses for their multimedia console, the CDI, which is shit. These games are known to be one of the worst games in the Nintendo franchises. The CDI was not a great success, although it wasn't due to H&M or other clothing stores where it was often found in the children's section. Recognizably not only by the big blue ball on the controller, but also on the disappointment and the frustration on children's faces because it wasn't like the actual Mario. We assume that H&M likely had shares in Philips, because why else would they have like 90% of all the Philips CDIs in their stock?
So the Nintendo PlayStation that won concept, because it was in production at some point, but nobody knows what happened to it. They found one Nintendo PlayStation
In 2015,
in 2015. It sold for
360,000 euros.
how much did he want?
I think 2.5 million.
Yeah.
Or 1.5 million was his lowest bid. Nobody bought it. He kept going lower, and eventually it got bought at 360,000.
Yeah, it's the only known version of the Nintendo PlayStation.
And it's actually working, by the way.
And it works, exactly. So yeah, as a console, it certainly flopped, but in a failure, it created Nintendo's biggest rival. The frustration and humiliation led Ken Kutaragi to create the Sony PlayStation, and 600 million consoles later, it's one of the biggest brands in gaming, earning Ken Kutaragi the title of Father of PlayStation. I mean, could you not? He's the coolest guy. Like, we want to take pictures with your PlayStation. Go on then. So yeah.
We have a lot more stuff.
Oh yeah, the
but
one more thing maybe.
do we have time?
Nah, it's one more.
You got
Apple.
4 minutes.
Apple also made a console. Nobody knows about it. It's the Apple Pippin. It's absolute garbage.
But it's
I
not
like
an
it.
interesting story, so we
But
skip
it's an interesting story, and we had to have one more
Yeah.
thing.
To wrap it up, we've been laughing at a lot of these things and
These companies.
these companies and their decisions, but to be fair, they're still around. Even Tiger Electronics still sells those LCD games. Atari is back, still selling
Their publishers. now, yeah.
things. So if you take one thing away from this, if you get inspired here at TwitchCon to do something or invest in something or like start something out of your comfort zone, go for it. The worst thing that can happen is you'll be a good story on a podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for our darling panelists. Can you give it up for the panelists? Thank you so much. And while we don't have any time for some questions today, my panelists have also mentioned that they will have chance after the panel to step outside, so they'll be loitering around for the next 10 minutes. If you guys have any more questions, you can catch them outside while we get ready for another panel. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your TwitchCon.